So I want to tell you a leadership lesson that I learned from my grandson, Banyan. He's the oldest grandson. So this was his first birthday that really stood out to me. He was 3 years old. We had a birthday party. His parents, my wife and I, the grandparents, some other friends, and it was the first grandchild, the only grandchild. So it wasn't at a park or anything. It was in a patio of a restaurant area. And it was interesting because there wasn't a lot of kids' toys there. So the parents were having a great time. But the little 3-year-old, Banyan, he drifted off to the side where there was that bean toss game. And so over there, the bean toss game, there was a white 5-gallon bucket. And he started taking gravel, little pieces of gray gravel that was landscape, and he started putting in the bucket, and every time he had his little hand, the bucket, with all the rocks, little noises, And I don't know exactly where he got that from. I think he got it because when he was over at our house, he would always want to help. He's a helper. And if Gangi, Grandma, is out in the yard, he wants to help her, and she's got buckets of stuff. And if I'm out in the yard, he wants to help. So he's always looking to be helpful. And I think that was what it was. But here he was, little 3-year-old. He's putting rocks in this bucket. And I'm watching him. And as I'm watching him, some of the other kids, his cousins and some other kids come over, and they start looking at what he's doing, and then they start putting rocks in the bucket. And then pretty soon, some of the older grandkids, right, they're like 6 to 8, they start thinking about different ways to do that. So they take the lid of the 5-gallon bucket, put little rocks in it, and then fill up. And pretty soon what happened was the bucket was filled. And all these little kids were standing around this full bucket. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Do you see that over there?" And she said, "Isn't that cute?" And I said, "That's leadership." Because you see, little Banyan, 3 years old, he didn't do anything to drive everybody over the bucket, but what he did was he started doing something, and he did it with enough passion and enthusiasm that others came along and they started using their gifts and talents to get things done. And that's really leadership, right? And so there's a lot of ways that we can motivate folks, and that's a deep conversation that we'll have another time. But it's real easy to understand what to do to demotivate folks. From a leadership perspective, that's the key. Don't do anything that's going to demotivate. So let me give you my leadership philosophy. Here it is. In the absence of commitment, all you have is half-hearted compliance or wholehearted defiance. So it's easy to think about, I experienced it, things that I did that would cause people to be compliant, which means doing as little as possible, or defiant. I experienced that in my home, I experienced that in work, and we don't want to do that. So think about the things that we might do that might get people to be committed. Because if they're committed, if there's conviction there, then there'll be more receptivity. Anything that we do that demotivates is going to create compliance or defiance, and that's much harder to work with, right? That makes sense? Okay.